Welcome, everyone, to Season 2, Episode 4 of the ZWSB.24 podcast. Hey, sis, I hope everything's going well. It's good to see you for Episode 4 of our podcast.
Yes. Hey there, sis. It's good to see you too. I am excited that we are now in episode 4. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in.
Yes. So everyone, we're super excited. We have a special guest this episode. And in this episode, we will be talking about parenting. But before we jump in, Z has a current event for us. So Z?
Yes. So everyone, this current event is going to be a little bit different. So the last couple of weeks, we've talked about technology. We talked about food. So this one, I wanted to talk about entertainment. So for those that love music artists, love going to concerts, there are a lot of artists right now on tour. I don't know about you, sis, but I feel like this year, for some reason, everyone is on tour. And it's just so hard. Yeah, and I'm a concert goer. I know you are. And it's trying to figure out who to go see because everyone is out right now. So right now, I have my list here, you guys. Now, this is just a few people. There are a lot of artists, but some of these may be some that you all have been to or do like. We have Maxwell. He's on his The Serenade Tour. We've got Andre 3000 out here. His is New Blue Sun live in concert tour. Yeah. For those that like Billie Eilish, she's also on tour. It's called Hit Me Hard and Soft, the tour. And then, of course, your girl Taylor Swift, still out here touring. She's about to hit 2 years. She's just added a few more shows. So we're about to hit 2 years with her. We've got Justin Timberlake. He's on the Forget Tomorrow World tour. And then, of course, Usher, past, present, and future. So keep a lookout for him as well. We've got Tori Kelly, Purple Skies World Tour. And then, of course, your boy Chris Brown on the 1111 tour. And most of these artists are out this fall, and they also will have some in 2025. So make sure to check for those tickets on Ticketmaster, or if there's like a third-party StubHub, check those out, see what their tour dates are going to be, and enjoy yourself, y'all. But just wanted to share those with you, and then just a little quick little glimpse for us. So next episode, you guys will get to see Stephanie and I, because there are a couple artists here that we're going to actually check out ourselves. So keep in mind for that one for our next episode. Back to you, girl.
All right. So as I mentioned before, this is episode 4 of our podcast. We're in season 2 currently, and we have a very special guest, someone that's near and dear to my heart. Her name is Dayla Brown. So we're going to go ahead and add her to the stage.
Hi.
And give her an introduction. So Dayla Brown, she's my sister-in-law. She is a mentor to me, and she is one amazing woman. So Dayla, she is a mother and wife. She has 2 children, and she's been working with behavioral health and in the education system since 1999. So in the nonprofit sector and in the educational system. So Dayla, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I feel like I could talk all day about all of this stuff. But yes, I always talk about my family first. So I've been married for 25 years, and I do have 2 older children, 2 boys. And so I say boys, right? We always look at them as our little kids, but they are young men. They are 24 and 21. And so excited about those boys and their new life they're making, right, in this world. But yes, I've been in education I was in Virginia Beach Public Schools for 17 years, and I work now at one of the universities, but I provide therapy to those who are 18 and up right now. Most of the work that I've done has been around behavior, supporting students in the educational sector, and then their families as well. So I really feel strongly about providing support for kids and their families. So yes, that's something I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. I have watched you over the years parent your boys from young elementary school to middle school to high school and now young adults. And both my husband and I, we have admired the way that you've parented, how effective it is. And I've never, ever seen you lose your cool while doing it. So So in watching you, there have been a lot that, of course, you and we've shared, and I've come to you for counsel based on, different things that our kids are facing. So we have a couple questions for you that we wanted you to kind of dive in, and especially with your frame of reference, being a counselor, and I mean, you've applied all of these ideals with your children. So we're going to jump into the first question. And I know that your husband, he traveled a bit. So here's our first question. How did you manage parenting while your husband was away?
This is so tricky, right? There's so many different kind of ways you prepare for this, and everybody has different situations, right? People used to always think our family was military because we moved around a lot, but our family is not. My husband was not in the military, so his traveling really was kind of unpredictable. So that's a little bit of a different pattern than being gone for like 6 months, 10 months. So he'd be gone for like a few days, come back for 3 weeks, be gone for 4 days, and then be gone for a week. So it was kind of hard to sometimes get some kind of rhythm going because it would constantly get interrupted. So that's hard. I know so many parents can relate to that, with that kind of interruption. So we had to kind of be together on it, like really come together as a team, my husband and I, and really talk about expectations together with them before he would leave. So kind of being on the same page and making sure they understood this is us together parenting. And just because dad's away doesn't mean anything really changes in terms of our expectations. So we had those kinds of conversations with them before he would leave. I had a lot of routines. I got to say, I lived by routines, y'all. And I know that you relate to that. So there was a routine around what we did when we got home from school, what they had to do first, when they could or could not watch TV, when they went to bed. We had fun things that were a part of our routine, right? They had some chores they had to do. We made them fun, but there was a predictability to every day. So that helped us with them, especially being so young. They were as young as like 2 and 5, when he would be traveling. So having predictability helped. And then also I had some fun traditions. So we would have like dishes I would make whenever Sean was out of town because it was not Sean's favorite dish, but they liked it. So when he would leave, they'd be like, "Are you making this, Mom?" I'm like, "Yeah." So, you have like fun traditions, do some fun things so that they appreciate, that time too. And it doesn't feel like it's this terrible time when dad's gone, And then, I really tried to pay attention to them when he was gone. And sometimes I noticed that they would be kind of out of sorts. And it was really not because they were just being, stubborn, or defiant, but because they were acting out of whatever they were feeling about him being gone. So me trying to be thoughtful about that and asking them, how are they feeling? And are they upset about dad being gone, and really trying to talk a lot about that helped me not to react to them all the time and really, be mindful of the fact that they're also dealing with him being gone too, and trying to talk about that and let them talk about how they felt about it. So those are just some things I did.
Yeah. I mean, I know, Z, you can relate to that as well. I know your husband, he recently just got out of the military. So, I mean, was that something that you incorporated into your, household while he was away?
Yeah, so definitely very similar to you, Dayla. So like you and I do have 2 older sons. I mean, now I do have a daughter too. But yeah, so my husband, when he was active duty, he would go PCS and be somewhere overseas for a year at a time. Actually, half of our marriage was him being gone traveling. And during those times, it's very difficult. You got to get in your own routine again and, be both mom and dad. And yeah, so there were things that we did. I kept them busy all the time, no matter what the season was, whether if it was the summer, we made sure that we went to the pool on a regular basis. If it was the fall, we always participated in some kind of fall event at the school, trunk or treats, or we would go to a lot of events, fall festivals, things of that nature. I made sure over the holidays, if he was gone during that time, we would go see my family. But then the other things I would catch myself doing, I cooked, but I did use that time to go out with my kids. So we would go to IHOP like on Tuesday nights, and it was something for them to look forward to every week. And then we would do game nights. So even though I still have game nights with all my family, when he was gone, I still wanted to keep doing it so that they didn't feel like, oh, because dad's gone, we can't continue the things that we would do when he would be there. We would just try to act as if he was there and make sure that every moment that my husband was available to talk, if he was able to make sure that we all were there to speak to him. So yeah, it's just kind of just getting into your own routine and sticking through it. And then you'll see that time kind of just flies, by during that time. But yeah, thank you for sharing that about how you manage parenting. Because I know, and even for you, I know for Stephanie, just recently with your husband being gone, I knew it was a little bit of a challenge too, but you had to come up with your own routine as well for you and your kiddos.
Yeah, absolutely. And, during that time too, we leaned a lot on family as well. So, of course, my parents helped, my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, they live in very close proximity to where we live. So we were able to lean on them. And then really for my kids, my children are very family oriented. So anytime we got to go over to Auntie Dayla's house and Uncle Sean's house, we went over there and the kids were thrilled to, do those things. And like you said, like maintaining the routine as if dad wasn't gone is a great thing. And then incorporating things in there, like Dayla, you said, you would make the kids a different dish that, their dad didn't want to have while he was there. So, that was something that they could look forward to. But not only that, memories, so I'm pretty sure that you guys talk about those times, hey, do you remember when dad was gone and mom used to make this? Because now in this stage of parenting, it's you and Sean and the kids are away. So I'm sure that they go back to those memories of time when dad was gone and it was just the three of you.
Yes, those are always, such precious memories, right? All of it is a part of their, all of their memories that they hold on to, right? And those experiences that they have. And that's such a good point you bring up about family. I don't know if I would have been able to manage the way I did if I didn't have family around. And his family, Sean's family, was a big part of that. So they were just always present. So that was always like a network of people that provided stability and, familiarity and that love that was extended outside of us. So that was another big thing. I'm glad you brought that up. That was a huge part of it too.
Yeah, definitely.
So we have another question for you. And Z is going to go ahead and ask you this one.
So this is a really good one, okay? Because listen, everyone, I'm strong-willed. I'm not going to lie to you guys, and I've come a long way. I had to learn that about myself, but how I learned it is because I ended up birthing my first child, who was very strong-willed, and my husband too. So what are So what are your tips, Dayla, for strong-willed children?
It's so funny. I love talking about this because I have such an experience. I joke about it with my youngest now. He was pretty strong-willed. And so I talk about this because sometimes I think we don't realize some of the tools in our tool belt we have to use in these ways to help kids. And this works even when when kids are in school with, with their teachers too. First of all, I always say that number one, always start with a lot of positive reinforcement. And I think that's something that we always forget. I know I forgot as a parent, you get so caught up in the everyday and do this, do that. We got to get this ready, do this. And you're correcting and get this and make sure you're on time. And you do so much of that you forget to kind of point out what they are doing well, and so I even try to be mindful of that now, and they're grown, just always pointing out some of the things you notice them do, and even some of the effort they put forth, right? It might not be some grand, amazing achievement, but just, showing them that you notice that they are doing some things that are helpful to them and helpful to other people is really, really a powerful thing for them. And specifically, like if you see there are certain behaviors that they're struggling with, right? It could be that they have a hard time kind of moving ahead and transitioning to the next task, right? Because that could be hard for a lot of kids to stop playing with the toys and come over and eat, let's say, right? And so a lot of times if you do notice they do actually do that positive behavior, like they do actually transition well, to point that out to them, so the more we point that out, I think the more you end up seeing that behavior continue to happen. So I think positive reinforcement is to me the number one thing to always keep in mind with any child, especially a child that could be strong-willed. One thing that also worked for me too is really thinking ahead before I knew we were about to do something that they wouldn't want to do, right? We all know the things our kids don't like or will give us a little bit of that, pushback for. And so thinking ahead and letting them know, remember in like 10 minutes, we're going to do such and such. So kind of giving them that, kind of unwritten, so to speak, timer. And you could even use a real timer. I used to use a real timer even sometimes when they were really young, when they had to transition to things. And that can be helpful. So it prepares them for the next thing that they have to do. I think that worked with my son sometimes. And the other thing that was a big thing, and you've probably heard of this, is just giving choices. So when a child can be strong-willed, a lot of times giving them a couple of different choices. Well, we can do this or we can do that, right? So we can, tie our shoes over here, or we can go outside and you can tie your shoes in the car, right? So giving them some ability to have a choice in the situation is always a huge thing that could be helpful for a child who feels like they want to have their way and want to have control, because then you give them a way to have control.
Mm-hmm.
So those are just a few things that kind of helped me with my child who was somewhat strong-willed for many years.
For you though.
Yes.
So because I know when I was growing up, and I'm sure with most generations, strong-willed was put as, oh, your child is bad. When for me, now that I've gotten older, I've seen my child, I'm just like, no, they're just challenging. It's not that they're bad, but they know what they want. They know what they will tell you what they don't like, and they tell you what they do like. But my question for you is, as you have watched your children, I know your children just a few more years older than mine. Mine just started college, but have you seen a difference from them being a strong-willed child when they were younger versus now, and how do they work through it? Because I'm curious to see how my son ends up being in the future. I'm just curious if there's been any change that you have seen or growth.
Yeah, I definitely have seen that. And every child's different, of course. But I think you pointed out something that's so important to remember, which is just that some of those, areas that can feel like weaknesses, they're like two sides of a coin. The other side is just the strength, right? That ends up tapping into. And that's exactly, I think, what you're pointing out. So my youngest, who was very strong-willed growing up, he is the one who's incredibly determined. He's very disciplined, very focused. So I've seen it now evolve into that part of his personality. And he likes to have things a certain way. So there's still some of that you can kind of see those traces of the strong will in there. But it's now been able to kind of evolve into this part of his personality that has served him really well in many areas, both academically, even as an athlete. So it has helped him to really hone into what his strengths are, and to see that actually can be a strength. So even noticing what you just pointed out helps you as a parent to think, okay, like, how do I help my child make good decisions, right? But not kind of squash what could be a strength in their personality. So that's a great way, to look at it, but yeah, that's what's happened with him. It's been amazing to watch them mature through some of these, personality traits.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it. I'm just always curious, how my oldest will be. And, he's very much actually like your son. So that's very encouraging and hopeful.
Yeah, for sure.
But I love how you highlighted that, Dayla, that to look at it as two sides of a coin, that while they're strong-willed, that trait or characteristic, it channels into them being, particular about certain things that helps them to achieve their goals, whether that be becoming a great athlete or, a study habit, because they're determined in other things, but they're also determined to do well and to reach that goal. So I like that you said that, because I feel like in parenting, at least for me, I sometimes can tend to focus on what's not happening or the behavior at hand.
Yes, that's always going to be the case, right? It's so easy to just focus on that weak area. Yeah, but if you see, and it's such a good thing that you ask that question about, where has it gone now? And that's such an important thing to see, because it helps you to see your child differently and to not, completely block what could be an opportunity for them to grow later on.
Yeah. No, I really love that because, as, our viewers watch this, this will actually shine light on
Mhm.
that different area there because, like I said, we can tend to focus on the things that are not happening or that my child is strong-willed and they're not listening, or like Z said, a lot of people equate being strong-willed with they're not behaving, they don't know how to listen. So I love that we have people in education that are being educated, about all of these different things,
Mhm.
and that they can see that in your child as well, because that too is important, especially, they're in our homes for, in the morning, and in the afternoon we get them back after school, but for the majority of the day they're with educators. So just knowing that there's someone like you out there working within the school system and advocating these ideals and systems in place is just so helpful, because not every kid is going to have the same temperament. So that's awesome, and I'm
Mhm.
so happy that you're sharing that here on this platform that we have. But, as you travel throughout the school system, throughout the or within the university that you work with. So along with that, with strong-willed children, I know sometimes that we have to correct and discipline. So what are your tips for correcting or disciplining effectively? Tell us about that. What would you recommend? How do you how do you correct a strong-willed child? How do you correct a child that um, wants to be a parent pleaser or a people pleaser?
Yeah. And those are so many different personalities. Yeah, that's so interesting. You're right. Like when you have a child who's strong willed or a child who could be a people pleaser, you do have to approach it differently. So there's not like a black and white answer, right? You brought up a perfect point to highlight, which is that there's no one way to raise all children, right? You have to be thoughtful about who your child is. But with that said, I will say we all know that discipline comes from the root word, which means to teach, right? Disciple, right? So discipline really is about teaching. And if we remember that discipline really is about teaching, that sometimes we'll, I think, view it differently, right? And so I know we all joke about it, right? When we talk about back in the day when we were disciplined, right? There was no talking about things, right? And I think now we've learned to talk a little bit more with our children about what they've done and what were some of the impacts of that, some of the consequences of the choices they made, but always focusing on what are we teaching, right? And what is the actual behavior we're trying to help them learn? I think empathy is a huge skill that kids developmentally aren't really learning fully until even middle school, and then building on that in high school. And if we remember that developmentally, they're just developing that skill of empathy. In middle school, they're really kind of refining that, trying to make sense out of that. We'll understand that we have to help our kids understand what that looks like, right? So asking our kids questions about how certain choices have made other individuals feel, and for them to imagine what that other person might
Mhm.
feel can be really helpful. The other thing I actually used to do with my kids, and I know it sounds kind of funny, kind of silly, I used to do a lot of modeling with them. And so, and they might have been somewhere in the ages of, actually, to be honest, I might have done this even recently in the past 5 years, y'all. But I used to always, when something would happen and it wouldn't go well, let's say they were disrespectful or whatever it was, we would talk about it, we would deal with it. I might have to correct them. And I would say, listen, we need to do that again. We're doing that over again. And we literally walk through it over
You're
again.
acting it out. Okay.
Literally would walk through the whole thing again. And I know it sounds a little cheesy, but we did it when they were young. And I've done that even as recent as like 5 years ago, and just be like, okay, we're gonna do that again. Like, how would that go? And I literally walk through it and I'll say, all right, da da da, and I'll say the same thing that I just said. Like, I walked in here, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? And I wait for them to respond and walk through the whole situation again. Because if we do it, it'll help we'll retain that behavior even more than if we just talk about it. And we know that, right? When we do things and when we actually, walk through that actual behavior and what change we want to make, that's going to actually end up becoming a part of our habit. And so I did that a lot with them. I would say, let's do that again. We're doing that over again. I would make them walk upstairs and let's do it all over again. And
Mhm.
so that was my tangible way. And granted, I don't have girls, right? So you have to think about this, right? Girls are different than boys. So we have to be thoughtful about how to talk through things also with girls. Stephanie, we talk about this all the time with your daughter about how she's very emotional, right? And she's very aware of her emotions and how things make her feel. And so when you have children who understand and talk about their emotions, get really affected by their emotions, you might respond a little differently, right? And talk through the emotions a lot more, right? About how things make them feel and how maybe things can go differently. My boys weren't as, emotive, so to speak, right? They didn't show their emotions as much, but
Mhm.
had to definitely act things out a lot. So that was one thing that was really, really, really helpful. And I think can be helpful with any child, both boys, girls, I think any age, I think can be really helpful to actually go through it again and say, okay, what would we do differently? Let's talk about that. Let's see how that would look, and that can be really helpful.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing that. So for me, I always found, which is funny, if my mom's watching this, I love all my children, but like I said before, my oldest was very challenging. As a matter of fact, my daughter, I think is going to be very challenging or strong-willed in a sense. But I always found it hard for me in certain situations how to discipline, because I never wanted my son to feel like he was any different from anyone else, because he's just a bright kid, very smart, knows what he wants. But the thing is, my mother used to always tell me, you're going to find that one thing one day, just trying to discipline him, that's going to affect him in a certain way. He's just going to get it. I'm still trying to figure that one out. But the thing is that, with children, I feel like depending on whatever phase that they're in life, it's not going to be the same. You kind of have to see as they're growing what's really going to stick to them in their mind, So I've learned that with my son. Change was very difficult for him. Every time we moved to a new location, being in the military, it was very difficult. He was the one that I had to calm down, talk to him, and just tell him it's going to be okay. My other one, he was fine. He was good to go. And I found that other things with him, that if I just spoke to him, not in a tone that made him feel like he wasn't important, or made him feel that his feelings were not important, and just take the time to talk to him, actually, whether it was 15 or 20 minutes of just me and him, it worked. When he didn't do very well on a certain project, or a grade wasn't really well, instead of just pointing fingers, sitting down with him, actually talking with him, worked for some reason. Versus my other one, I can snap at him, which is not the greatest thing, but there are times that I would, and he would just get it. He'd be like, all right, I'll get it. I'll fix it. My other one, my oldest, was very emotional, and I had to learn how to speak to him in a certain way to
Right.
correct that situation. But I found I struggled, to be honest, for a while trying to figure
Yeah.
that out.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Every child is different, right? Like you have to think about like what is their personality like? What do they respond to, right? How do they
Mhm.
process, things? Do they process things through their emotions, right? Do they process quickly by talking really, just about things briefly? I remember I used to have my children write a lot. And I
Mhm.
didn't have them write sentences a million times like my parents might have made me write, but I did have them write about like what they thought how this situation might have impacted different people. And I had them write because I always believe writing also helps to practice a good skill, right?
Mhm.
So I had them write a lot and then they would have to just, share with me what it was that they wrote about because I do believe time away to reflect is helpful for
Mhm.
all of us, right? Isn't that helpful for any of us to like step away for a minute and reflect? So if we teach them how to, and we call it time out these days, right? But like giving them time away to step away and actually think about it and actually reflect on what happened and like how that affected them and other people is really an important skill to build. So
Mhm.
that can be helpful too.
Yeah, I remember doing that actually, having my son journal in a composition book. We did that for a
Mhm.
good 6 months. It was like a safe space for him. The
Mm.
different thing though is that I didn't read what he said, just
Ah,
because I wanted him to have a place for him to kind of like a diary in a sense for a woman, but he would do that, and then I left the floor open if he ever wanted to discuss openly about any situation. He would from time to time, but that is good that you brought that up. I did do that with him. Now that I think back on that, yeah, there was a time when we went through, and that was middle school. Middle school was really, really challenging time for him. But yeah, that's a good tip.
yeah, that's good.
Thank you for
That's great.
sharing.
Yeah, that is a great tip. And that's, something to think about, especially if you have a child that may not be willing to talk all the time. I know that's something that we are going through in this stage with our child being in seventh grade. He likes to talk about certain things, but I can tell that there's certain things that he's not talking about.
Mm.
So, and a while ago, he asked me for this book called A Dude Diary.
Mm.
And I got it for him because I did want him to be able to not harness those feelings, but be able to
Mhm.
release them because, you've got to get it from here and then out. And so that's a great tool, to share and remind us because until now I had totally forgotten about that. And I know
Mhm.
we've had some moments where, he's because boys aren't as emotional as girls are, and so a lot of times they just don't want to talk about certain things. Or with my husband being away, occasionally sometimes it's easier for him to maybe write it down rather than in a private place at home, rather than speaking to me about it.
Mhm.
And just letting him know that, like you said, Z, the floor is open if you want to talk, or if you feel more comfortable talking to your dad when he gets home, or a family member that you're close
Mhm.
with. I know that a couple times, Dayla, I've reached out to Sean about a couple things to say, hey, do you mind talking to Brayden about this? Because I just didn't feel like I can connect with him and help him to understand the way that he needed to. Um, and along with that, I think surrounding yourself with a village of people that your children can talk to that you trust is extremely important
Huge.
as well.
Yeah, that is so huge. And it's funny. And once again, I say I don't have daughters, but I know young girls, right? We do tend to talk through things, right?
Mhm.
And that's healing for us. Boys are not often, afforded that space or taught that that is a space they should have. So it's so awesome when you can. Like, it's so cool to hear y'all as mothers just like already having those practices there for your kids and being able to tell them you can share
Mhm.
how you feel and you can keep it, to yourself, or you could share it with me, but giving them the freedom, and permission to, express how they feel is so powerful for boys too.
Absolutely. Thank you for those tips. These are, it's one thing to read about them, but it's another thing to talk about them and
Mhm.
hear and share your experiences with someone else in this space, because it just reminds you that this is another avenue of how we can effectively correct our children and discipline them or disciple them.
Yeah.
So along with that, we've talked about, of course, my children. I have a younger daughter. She's going to be 4 soon. Um, my son, he's going to be 13 soon. Dayla, you have 2 young adults, and Z, you have a young adult, you have a high schooler, and then you have a preschooler.
Right.
So, along with that, what are your tips for parenting through transition? Because
Mm.
that can be difficult for our kids as well. So do you have any tips on that?
So, and transition can mean a lot of things. Like, it depends, right? There are transition that have to do with moving. There are transitions that have to do with, let's say, someone moves into your home and they're living with your family now. So it kind of depends on what transitions, you mean. When you talk about transitions, do you mean kids getting older, or just transitions that happen in life that might create, new things for you?
I think so. Things that happen in life.
Yeah. Okay.
So, going from, let's say, middle school into high school,
Mhm.
or leaving your parents' home,
Mm.
or because that's a big transition, right? Because through high school, you're very scheduled. You have either a block system,
Mhm.
your time is allotted for you, and you do a certain things, but your time's a little bit freed up in college.
Mhm.
So tell me, how do you help your child navigate that space and that transition well?
Mm.
How have you done that so far? Because I think you've done a great job. from the outside looking in.
Well, it's never easy, right? We're learning as we go, and every child, as we keep saying, is so different, right? I think that having open communication with your children is number one, right? So, however you can, and Z, you gave a wonderful example of that a moment ago when you let your son kind of have this kind of journal, and he didn't have to share it with you. He could if he wanted to, just providing that space for that open kind of expression. It's so important to talk to our kids about how they want us to communicate with them. So the more open they feel with us and the more they feel like they can talk to us, the easier it'll be for them to move through life. That's always going to be the case. So that's always the first thing I always talk about, is just how to continue to have open communication with our kids in a way where they know they're always going to get wisdom from us, right? So they know they're going to have us to say, well, this might be helpful for you to do. They know they're going to get some of that. But if they know they have support from you and that you want to know how they feel and that you won't have a reaction to the feelings that they have, that you will create an open space for them to share how they feel, that you might give them some advice about what to do, right, when they talk about some things they struggle with, but that you won't judge their feelings, right? Feelings are just what we have, right? Like, and it can feel so hard when someone judges our feelings, right? But when you are a child and your parent, is open to hearing how you feel, it can create such a safe space for you. So that's number one, I think, for us as parents, to just create that open communication and to talk to them about all the things, like talk to them about who they like and how is that making them feel and how are the kids in school, all the things we love to talk about, but not, creating that space that makes it hard for them to share some of that. So that's, I think, number one. The other thing is just kind of talking ahead of those transitions, similar to like when there are just other changes in the house, but talking ahead about what is coming up, right? And talking about some of those transitions. What are you expecting, right? What do you think it's going to be like, right? What are some of the things that you think might happen that might be challenging? Well, what do you think you can do about those? Just thinking about it now. So like thinking ahead about some of those transitions can be really helpful so that they have in their mind, what might that be like, and have them to already be planning ahead for those transitions. And as parents, right, like we have to also remind ourselves of what these developmental stages are about, right? I often joke about how kids go through the terrible twos like multiple times in life, right? It's like
Yeah,
like
many times. It's not just when you do.
right, like over and over. And it's like, if we understand development and where kids are at different stages, right? That in middle school, right, that they're figuring out who they are in relation to their peers. That's huge. And so if we know that, it'll be easier for us to understand the struggles they have, right? If we understand that in high school, they're figuring out how to be independent and how to make decisions, right? Then we won't be surprised when they do certain things and they make some maybe not so smart decisions, right? Because they're experimenting with figuring out how to do that. And then as they get older, even beyond that, right? They are actually making their way in life. Like they have to move away from us. They have to move forward in life and figuring out who they are outside of us. And so the more we understand kind of how they're developing through those stages and what kind of new decisions they have to make and how they need to be independent, the easier it'll be for us to even deal with some of those transitions in their lives also. And what I've found has been the most valuable thing too, is to really kind of surround your children with people who will always be in their corner, right? I've always hoped that my kids would have someone to talk to outside of me.
Yeah.
And just surrounding them with a village, so to speak. You all talk about the village all the time, right? So like surround your kids with that village who loves them, will love them forever, because there are going to be many times in life they won't want to talk to you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not going to be the person they might want to talk to, but have I surrounded them with people that they will be able to reach out to when they need to lean on somebody? And I think that's really important. I know it can be tricky sometimes to figure that out, especially if we move to a new place, trying to meet people, but surrounding our kids with those people in their lives is becomes so, so critical later on.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. There was something that you pointed out that just brings me back to, some memories. And you had mentioned communication is really key for transition. Now, I know for me growing up, not that it was wrong, but I think with my generation, it to me, with ours, I felt like my parents didn't communicate certain things with me, and I had to kind of learn through those things. Some were mistakes. You want your children to make mistakes. It's good. They learn from them. You can't fix everything, and they have to learn how to become independent. But I like being open with communication. There are things that, which I'm not going to share right here or necessarily today, but there were just certain topics that I knew we never talked about growing up that I wish my parents had spoken to me. So then that way at this age, I can just be really, or even my younger, like in my 20s, I can be open and not feel embarrassed. Not that they wanted me to feel embarrassed. It's just maybe they felt embarrassed and couldn't discuss certain topics with me. So with my boys, which I love, communication definitely is so important, because as I see them transition, whether it's from elementary to middle to high school and now college, there are times now where they'll come up to me and have these, you know, difficult conversations, but I'm glad that I was able to give them that space to be open to communication, not feel embarrassed about those certain things. As for when I was younger, I never said anything because I felt like I was going to be like, I felt ashamed, or that I was going to be pointed at, or you were wrong for thinking like that. And so I think that tip that you gave is so important, and I'm thankful that you said that, because it makes me feel proud that I feel like I've done something right. Now, my son's not going to tell me everything. My oldest, he's very quiet. My middle child, he's very open. That's just how he is, different personalities. But yeah, I do feel like that, because I want to make sure that, I don't know, one day when I'm in my 50s or 60s years from now, my children can come to me and say, "Hey, Mom, I have something I want to talk to you. Is that okay?" Versus canceling me out. Now I do like having his own friends, like what you're saying, having their own friends. I can advocate. That's important too. But I'm glad that I have that ability with my children, that they feel like I'm a safe place when that time comes, because it really is important. Communication, I mean, for every moment of their life is just super important. So thank you for pointing that out.
I love that.
Thank you.
Dayla, everything that you shared today, it's just such a wonderful reminder of how we can parent effectively and purposely, because at the end of the day, we want to raise great human beings for the kingdom of God, because we know that they're a vessel. And so they're supposed to, go into this world and fulfill their purpose and also be great human beings. So thank you, Dayla, so much for joining us today. I don't want to let you go yet, because I know, and I'm super excited, that you have just developed Deep Waters Wellness LLC.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for you and this new journey that you're embarking on. Of course, you have a copious amount of experience. I feel like every time I talk to you, I'm a calmer person, and I look at things through a different lens. So tell us a little bit about your new endeavor.
So yeah, I'm really excited. It's called Deep Waters Wellness. Comes from the verse Proverbs 20:5, and I just love kind of the meaning about it. That just we are wells of deep waters, right? And just drawing that out through that insight is just what I have felt passionate about, and sometimes we need help to do that, right? And that's okay. Like, God brings people in our lives to help us to make sense out of our lives and where we need to move forward, and how to do that in a way that makes us feel healthy. And I think that is just a part of what I feel like God has called me to do. So I'm providing therapy for folks who are 18 and up. And I'm doing that through a place called Center for Effective Change here in Virginia Beach. And I do have an Instagram handle, which is Deep Waters Wellness, very simple. And so anybody can follow that as well. And I've shared some information there about some numbers that folks can call, and my website as well is up there. And so folks can visit and see some of the things that I focus on. I've worked with many people, mostly who struggle with some levels of anxiety or some degrees of depression, and mostly kind of dealing with just stressors in life, right? And just trying to figure out how to manage stress. And I love working with parents. I love working with educators. I think it's so important for us to support ourselves. And, we will go work out and get a trainer, right? But we don't think as quickly to think
Mhm.
about having a therapist who will help us with our own mental wellness, which is so, so, so important, right? To
Mhm.
have that. And so I'm just excited to be able to do that. So I am seeing clients as I can and as they call in, and I'm excited to work with folks.
Oh, yay.
I am,
Congratulations and good
yeah,
luck with everything. This is amazing.
it is amazing. I'm so happy for you, Dayla. I know that this is going to be incredible. You definitely have a calling on your life to do this. So I am just, um, enthralled to see everything that's going to come of it. You guys, I'm going to put all of the information in our description below this video for you guys, so you guys can check out her Instagram, check out her website, and so we could just make sure that Dayla is there for you if you need her. Dayla, thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate your time and everything that you're doing. You are a wonderful person, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much. Z, you're going to tell us a little bit more about our podcast and what's coming up next.
Yes, everyone. Thank you for joining in again today on this episode for ZWSB.24. You guys, we are here every Tuesday now. So please tune into this podcast every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Episode 5, guys, premieres next Tuesday, October 29th. And please follow, like, share, and subscribe to ZWSB.24 on our YouTube channel. And you can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. So until next week, you have a great week, everyone. And I love you, sis, and I'll see you next week as well. Bye, everyone.
Love you, sis. Take care. Bye-bye.